Okay, we're adding and subtracting unlike fractions. That means the denominators will be different. We're going to start on this reading to learn side in your packet, so make sure you turn to the right page. So let's just fill in some of this here. Fractions with different denominators are called unlike fractions. To add unlike fractions, you have to first find a common denominator. That should be a review. So a common denominator for 5 and 12, remember we just did the least common multiple, so you could count by 12s. Another way people find common denominators is just to multiply the two bottom numbers together. I don't really care which one you do, if you find the least common, or if sometimes multiplying them is the least common, or if you just multiply the two bottoms together. The problem is if you don't find the least common denominator, you're going to have a larger fraction that you have to reduce. But if you're okay with that, that's fine. So if I count by 12s, I've got 12, 24, 36, 48, 60 seems to be the first one that 5 will also go into. So my common denominator would be 60. That also is the least common denominator. It just happens to be also the product of 5 and 12. To subtract unlike fractions, you also have to find a common denominator. Okay. Monique rewrote 6/4 minus 1/3 as 36 over 24 and 8 minus 8 over 24. So I prefer, when I do my fractions and find my common denominators, I write them vertically. I don't like it horizontally because I like to have right next to me the common denominator, because then I can see what I changed it to. So to go from 4 to 24, you times by 6, this would be 36. To get to 24 here, you times by 8. So is that what she wrote? Is she correct? She is. And we just did the problem to prove that she was correct. Okay? So let's do some examples. There's going to be somewhere you can borrow with the subtraction. That'll probably ring a bell. Some of this is going to end up being review. The only difference is some of them will have negatives. So once we change our denominators, we're going to have some negatives on top, and we have to just follow our integer rules on top of it. Okay. So I'm looking at this one here, and example 2. It looks like they made some really big improper fractions, and I'm okay with that if you want to do that, but look how big these numbers can get. So if you don't like borrowing, I mean you absolutely hate it, you can always change your numbers into improper fractions. But I tend not to do that whenever the numbers get to be too crazy. I will turn them into improper if I have negatives involved. But this one doesn't have any negatives involved, and the first number is bigger than the second number. I always change to a common denominator first before I decide if I have to borrow or turn anything into improper. So 18 would be the common denominator for 9 and 6. To get there, we did times 2, so that's 4. To get this one, we do times 3, so that's 15. And I can see that 4 minus 15 I can't do. I could if that was just the fractions, but there's whole numbers there, so I can't do that. It's different because this is a whole part that's bigger than this whole part, but there's just the fraction isn't. So you have to borrow. So there's 2 ways to borrow. You're going to borrow 1 whole, so that's going to turn into an 8. 2 different ways you can look at this. You can say there's my 1 whole, and I'm going to make this mixed number improper. 18 times 1 is 18 plus 4 is 22 over 18. Other people will think of it as, when I borrow 1 whole, whatever the bottom number is, I use that. 18 eighteenths is 1 whole plus the 4 eighteenths. And did I get the 22 eighteenths? Yes. Some people think of it as, when I have the 1 whole, because it's 18 eighteenths, I'm just going to add that to that, and I'm going to get 22. Any way you do it is fine. Now I can do 22 minus 15, which is 7. Keep the bottom the same. 8 minus 8 is 0, so I'm done with at 7/8. And I prefer that to something that large. Okay? All right, let's go down here and look at some of these problems that have negatives in them. So I'm looking at number 3 first. I've got a negative 2/3. Pay attention to those negative signs. Make sure you keep them with the number whenever you make your common denominators, okay? So I have 3 and 4 as my denominator. I'm going to pick 12 as my common denominator, which also happens to be the product of 3 and 4. To get to the 12, I had to times by 4, which gives me a negative 8 on top. Times by 3 gives me a positive 3 on the bottom. And remembering that the bottom stays the same, I then look at negative 8 plus 3. Negative 8 plus 3 is negative 5, and that is in simplest form. Looking at number 4, if I have a minus with a negative, I'm going to keep change, just like I would if it was just negative 6 minus 6. The bottoms are already the same, so I don't have to do anything. That's 11. And then negative 6 plus negative 6 is negative 12. Keep that negative in front. 11 goes into it one time with 1/11th left over. Let's do number 8, because there's not a lot of room, so I'm picking and choosing here. I've got 7 and 5/6 plus negative 3 and 1/3. Okay, so I've got different signs. If I have different signs, I find the difference. So I'm going to actually be subtracting these two because I have different signs. But I do need to find my common denominator. I'm going to make it a 6, so that's times 2. I am subtracting because they're different signs. So I've got 5 minus 2 is 3, and I got 7 minus 3 is 4. And then when I reduce it, it would be 4 1/2. I have more positives, so my answer is positive. Okay? Let's look at number 10. This one looks like it would be really tough, but when you do your keep, change, you would just have to change the pluses, and then you're just adding. You would find your common denominators, and you would go ahead and add. I'm looking at number 13. Nope, not number 13. Which one did I want to do? Let's do number 15. I've got 5 and 1/10 minus 3 and 2/3, because I want to do another borrowing one. Let's make our common denominator of 30. This would be times 3, so that's 3. This would be times 10, 20. All right, so I can't do this one. I need to borrow. So 3 minus 20 I can't do. Cross out the 5, borrow 1 whole. I like showing the 1 whole that way and then turning it into improper, because there's where you see where that 1 whole is that you borrowed. 30 times 1 is 30, plus 3 is 33. If you're comfortable doing it a different way, that's fine too. 33 minus 12 is 13. Keep the bottom the same. 4 minus 3 is 1. No negatives to worry about for that one. Okay. I'm going to show you this one, the same one, using the improper fraction way, if you prefer that, so that you have one example like that. So 5 times 10 is 50, plus 1 is 51 over 10. Minus 3 times 3 is 9, plus 2 is 11 thirds. I'm still going to have 30ths for my common denominator. That's times 3. That'd be 153. This one's times 10. That would be 110. And then I have to subtract those. 153 minus 110 is going to be 43 over 30. Goes in once with 13 left over. So you decide which way you prefer when you get crazy ones like that. Okay? Let's do, we can do, let's do number 14. We keep, change, because I have a subtraction. So I have 5 and 8 ninths. Now it's plus 2 and 1/3 we have to find our common denominators first. We're going to use a 9, that's an 8, say times 3. I'm going to add and get 11 ninths, and 5 plus 2 is 7. Now you can't leave it improper like that. The 11 ninths would be 1 and 2 ninths. So you have to put the 7 and the 1 together, and then the 2 ninths would be your fraction part. Okay? So there's another example up here if you need it, but I think that's a good amount.